Most people think that saving money and being frugal means not buying anything, but paradoxically, that's often why they end up rebuying the same stuff all year long. Today I'm sharing intentional Amazon purchases that don't add to your spending, but rather replace it, ultimately making life cheaper in the long run. These are things I already own, actually use, and bought on purpose because they consistently save me money over time. Some are one-time purchases, while others are items I repurchase as annually because they reliably lower my expenses. You'll find links to everything I mention in the description below, and one of these might look a bit silly at first, but it's the exact reason I stopped throwing away food I'd already paid for. Let's start with the least exciting on this list: Swedish cleaning cloths. This is the kind of thing that doesn't feel important until you realize how often you used to rebuy it. If paper towels are your default for counters, spills, and quick messes, these slowly replace most of that without you having to change your cleaning habits or even think about it. They're incredibly absorbent, hold up well, and when they're dirty, you simply toss them in the washing machine instead of the trash. I keep a couple right by the sink, which is key to their effectiveness. You grab them without thinking, just as you would a paper towel. But you're not tearing off a new one every time something spills. Over time, you just stop going through paper towels as quickly. It's not because you consciously tried to be better, it just happens naturally. It took me a while to notice, but one day I realized I simply wasn't buying paper towels the way I used to. Next up are beeswax bowl covers. These are another item I always keep on hand and replace as needed. They remind me of something my grandmother used to have years ago. I didn't think I needed them initially, only buying them because I constantly ran into that moment where you put something in the fridge and realize you don't have the right lid for the container. Plastic wrap technically works, but it never sticks properly, and you end up throwing it away every time you check what's in the bowl. Plus, I'm not a fan of using so much plastic. These stretch over bowls actually stay put, and when you're done, you just rinse them off with hot soapy water and use them again. That's it. No wrestling with plastic wrap, no rewrapping the same bowl 3 times, and no tossing it every time you open the fridge. I even bought these for a few people for Christmas. If you don't want to spend money on these, there are workarounds. Dollar store shower caps do basically the same thing. My grandmother used to grab them from hotels, though I'm not sure they even give those out anymore. Once you stop using plastic wrap as your default, you realize how often you were rebuying it without ever really deciding to. Alright, this is the one that looks a little silly at first. Super cubes. They're essentially large silicone trays, like giant ice cube trays, but their size makes all the difference. They freeze foods in practical portions you'll actually use, instead of pouring everything into a massive block that feels like a project to deal with later. This was the game changer that finally stopped me from losing food in the freezer. I have them in various sizes, and freezing leftovers no longer feels annoying. I get portioned soup, chili, or casseroles in amounts that actually make sense. When I need them, they're easy to grab and use instead of getting buried and forgotten. My 27-year-old special needs son has a specific diet, so these cubes allow me to batch cook and easily freeze his lunches for his day program. When things stack neatly and fit into containers you already own, you're far more likely to use what you've frozen. Speaking of shapes, I also really like the Shape and Store ones, which I've had for years. They're a bit cheaper, and I prefer them because the frozen blocks fit perfectly into my Pyrex containers, which sounds oddly specific, but it truly matters. None of this made me super crazy organized. Well, maybe just a little bit more organized, but it certainly made it easy to use food I had already paid for. Everything up to this point is about stopping small, sneaky rebuys. Paper products, food waste, things that disappear without you noticing. What comes next is more about protecting what you've already paid for. Just a reminder, all the links are below, so you can check them out later if anything seems useful. This little bag sealer surprised me with how often I actually use it. We don't go through chips or snacks very fast, so bags would often get rolled down, clipped, and shoved back into the pantry only to end up stale. The same goes for items in the freezer. You roll them up, clip them, and then they open up and get freezer burn. Half the time, I'd throw things out and feel annoyed because we'd barely touched them. This simply reseals the bag so its contents actually stay fresh. I grab it for snack bags, frozen vegetables, or anything that comes in a bag that we don't finish right away. It's small, which you'll notice many of these items are because I live in a small house, and this fits perfectly in a drawer, so I don't really think about it. I just use it. It's one of those things where you just stop throwing food out, but you don't notice it happening in the moment. I didn't think I needed a sweater shaver until I had one. Once sweaters start to pill, I tend to reach for them less. Even if they still fit and are perfectly fine, they just don't look right. They feel a little tired, and somehow that thought turns into, maybe I need a new one. This shaver removes the fuzz and makes them look good again, which means I keep wearing what I already own. I use it a lot on my thrifted sweaters, especially at the beginning of winter, and it makes a significant difference, probably more than you'd expect. It's not about clothes looking perfect, it simply keeps things in rotations instead of replacing them. And it makes you feel good about actually taking care of what you already own. This is a Thomas Stone toilet cleaner. This one is very unglamorous, but it works wonders. Our water leaves a ring in the toilet pretty quickly, even when the toilet is new and absolutely clean. If we ignore it, it just gets harder to deal with later, feeling like a bigger project than it needs to be. This pumice stone removes it easily without chemicals or excessive scrubbing, and it's specifically designed for toilets. I use it every so often, and then I'm done with it, instead of letting the ring build up and annoy me. It's just basic maintenance, but it prevents small issues from turning into bigger, more expensive ones. This is the Spatula jar spatula. This jar spatula is one of those things that feels a little ridiculous until you actually use it. I used to get annoyed every time I threw a jar out, knowing there was still stuck in the corners that I just couldn't reach without making a mess. Peanut butter, mayonnaise, applesauce, whatever it was. I'd tell myself it wasn't a big deal, but it happened all the time. This spatula simply gets in there and thoroughly clears the jar out. That's really it. You stop tossing things early because they're annoying to finish. I'll be honest, the one I bought years ago works better than the newer version, although the newer one is smaller and has been everywhere lately, so I'm linking both. Use whatever works for you. The point is to truly clean out your jars instead of wasting product. I always wanted a food saver, but the big ones felt like overkill. They're expensive, take up too much space, and I just didn't want another bulky appliance sitting around. This smaller system made more sense for how we actually live. I use it for meat, leftovers, and anything I know we won't get to right away. Food stays fresher longer, especially in the freezer, and I don't end up pulling something out weeks later only to realize it's freezer burned. They do come with their own bags, which are an added expense, but they're not overly pricey and they work beautifully. This is where the list changes a little, because a lot of spending doesn't come from wanting things. It comes from being uncomfortable, tired, or simply feeling overwhelmed. These next items are probably the most expensive on the list, and I don't buy them casually. For me, this wasn't really about sheets. It was about sleep. It was about hot flashes, night sweats, and waking up uncomfortable. Once the cycle of broken sleep starts, everything else feels harder the next day. Sleeping better changes more than you'd expect. When I'm rested, I'm less cranky, less impulsive, and far less likely to spend money just because I'm tired and uncomfortable. I don't feel like dealing with this purchases, less takeout, less scrolling and buying unnecessary things late at night when I should be sleeping. These weren't a splurge for me. They were a quality of life investment that quietly affects my spending without even trying. These are the bamboo sheet sets. They're cooling sheets, soft, silky, and incredibly comfortable. I love them and highly recommend them. This next one sort of surprised me a little bit. Beef tallow on my face. Last year, I had an allergic reaction to castor oil, and suddenly a bunch of products I had been using without thinking were off the table. It seemed like everything that was fine before was somehow not fine now. My skin is dry and irritated in the winter, especially, and I found myself constantly searching for something else to fix it. I was buying things, trying them, not loving them, and then moving on to the next. I don't have to tell you that these things can get very pricey. I ended up trying a tallow face moisturizer mostly out of frustration, but also because my friend Rita suggested it, and her skin is beautiful. And it was just wow, it worked. Especially this winter, when the air is dry and my skin normally feels tight no matter what I put on it. Once I found this tallow, I stopped searching. I just use the same thing every day and move on. And I've hardly used any of it. That alone cut way down on the random skincare purchases I used to make without even realizing that's what I was doing. Makeup used to be another one of those things I would constantly try, looking for the perfect product to do the perfect job I needed. I don't wear a lot of makeup, mostly just for recording these videos, but a good concealer matters at my age. I just turned 53 on January 18th, so under-eye products are super important. I'd try one, and it would crease or wear off or just not look right, and then I'd start looking for another. I wasn't trying to buy more makeup. I just wanted it to work. So I bought both the Tarte version as clay concealer, and honestly this one, the clay concealer, works just as well for me, if not better than Tarte. Having one that works is a lot easier than a drawer full of half-used ones. This comes with a brush, but I'm not using it. I prefer my finger. It doesn't crease in my lines because, let's face it, as a 53-year-old woman, I have lines. I think it works fantastically and I highly recommend it. I have 2 bonus items for you. The first is this fleece bathrobe. It gets worn every single day in my house. It's marketed as a bathrobe, but I think of it as an at-home, any time of day type of sweater or throw-on cover-up. I throw it on in the morning, I grab it at night, and honestly, it just makes being at home more comfortable. When I'm warm, I'm not tempted to crank up the heat, and I get things done instead of curling up in a blanket scrolling Instagram. It's not a luxury item for me. It's part of how I keep my home feeling good enough that I don't feel the need to escape it. The next bonus item is these leggings. If you get my newsletter, I'm sure you've heard about these because I mention them often. They're similar to the bathrobe, just in a different way. I wear these constantly, working from home, running errands, everyday life. They fit well, they're comfortable, and I don't have to think about them. The best part is they're very affordable, and they are buttery soft. I've had mine for over a year, and when I find something like that, I stop looking. I've got them in multiple colors. I'm not replacing them, I'm not browsing for something better, and I'm not buying 3 different pairs, trying to get it right. Did I mention they're very affordable on Amazon? I've never had anything that I've paid so little for that has lasted so long. Having a couple of go-to items I reach for over and over again is simpler and ends up costing less in the long run. So that's it. Those are the Amazon purchases I made intentionally. Some of these might be trendy, but they're not things I buy just because they're on sale. They're items I already use that make everyday life run a little smoother, which ends up saving money without me having to think about it all year long. Once you start looking at spending this way, you notice how much of it isn't really about wanting more stuff. It's about fixing small annoyances, replacing things you already paid for, or trying to feel more comfortable when you're tired or overwhelmed. When those underlying needs are handled, a lot of unnecessary spending just stops. Everything I mentioned is linked below exactly as shown. And if you already own something similar that works for you, that's great. This isn't about buying more, it's about buying with intention.